Hello everyone and welcome to another one of our DnDBeyond Homebrew tutorial videos. So today is another one of our videos where we have gone back, those who are seeing this as a new video, and we are fixing up the video as the previous edition did have some audio issues. So today we are covering subclasses. Now, if you want to create a subclass from scratch, we go over here, we go create subclass. It's a little bit different to every other piece of homebrew in the system. So for starters, you have to pick your class. You cannot, I know Wizards did try at one point to do subclasses that could be used by multiple classes in a UA. You really cannot do that here. You can recreate them one per class, but you have to pick a class when you're creating it. The other thing is, and it's why that one would be especially difficult to do, unlike all the other homebrew editors which let you edit use a piece of homebrew you've already created as a template, this will not. You can only pick subclasses that D&D Beyond have on the system as a base subclass. I believe it does also, we can easily check, I believe it does include also, yeah, it includes Gunziger, so it includes the critical role pieces, but it's basically official ones and the critical role ones, and that's it. So we're going to look at some of these for some examples. So obviously, name, short description, long description. If you're a paladin like this one is, you might want to put your tenets in here. Spellcasting ability is what you said. Spellcasting ability can cast spells. If you're part of a class that already can cast spells, you don't really need to mess with this section. This section mainly comes in with things like if you wanted to create a subclass for fighter or something like that. Or maybe a subclass for a class that can cast spells, but you want to change it, making them more spellcaster focused or change what their casting ability is. So can cast spells, you could be yes, no. If you leave it like this, it will be whatever the base class's method is. Additional spell list, this you would pick if you just want to go, this subclass knows all of the cleric spells, for example. Spell prepare type, you pick half level or full level. If you leave it as a dash, it will default to whatever the base class is. And knows all spells, yes or no. No is very much like a wizard, where they need to learn it, whereas yes is more like most of the other casters where they know the full list of spells, but they've got to pick in. Additional specific spells. Here you can just type any spell and add it to the list. This will be added to the subclass's spell list. So like you've got overspells here, you wouldn't put that in the subclass ability, you would just put that here on additional specific spells. Obviously class features, so we'll go into one now with overspells. You got to give it a name. Snippet code is what you see on the short end of the sheet. So I'll give an example here. Characters. Pick the first character we see. So if we go with this character, a snippet is what you see here. So snippet is this part. And you'll see here, for example, it's pulling on my imp modifier for magical tinkering to determine what that is. And then when you click on it, you get the full description. So for this, when I click on it, I will get the full description of this ability here, and this is what you see on the quick reference. In the description will be documents about the snippet codes that you can do for you to have a read of and work on. Obviously, snippets don't use things like the bracket spell because they can't reference it, whereas the main description can, so be sure with like spell lists to do that there. That's also in the description down below. You need to say what level they unlock it, and then display order is just what order. If someone's looking at your subclass, they'll appear in. Tick has options. There's options, you can hide abilities in the builder and in the sheet. If you want them to kind of be background abilities that make things work, but they don't get to see. And if you do have options, you can put here where options are known. This is for things like fighting styles where they will learn more. This is more like a battle master's maneuvers where they can pick an option, and then they will unlock more options to pick from as their leveling progresses. And it means you don't have to make a new class feature every time they would learn a new one. So class feature options, we'll come back to that in a minute. We will. So obviously you have modifiers. Modifiers works very much like all the other pieces you've seen in this series. Pick a modifier type and modifier subtype. So you could go, for example, you could go, they learn a language, pick a language. You could give them proficiency in an item or a tool. I think in some rare cases you might be able to get advantage in certain conditions, or you have like advantage on wisdom saves, things like that. You can set that all here. Close the character sheet just to save space. Spells, I believe we have a good example here. Yep. So here we have spells. So if we look at this, it's when they get that class feature, they might learn a spell. So if they have a choice, you would put multiple spells in this box. If it's you want to unlock 2 spells that are very specific, what you would do is you would put in 2 entries, 1 for each spell. You can pick what level of spell. If they have a choice of, you can learn a first level spell of a set amount of a set type. And you could pick which class spell list they're learning from. If it's an attack type, you can set it to only be ritual spells. You can set what ability score they have to use if they have a number of uses. So, for example, you could go, they have a number of uses equal to your wisdom score. So you would go number of uses, you could go 0 and then set it to wisdom, and this would make it that they can use this spell a number of times per amount equal to their wisdom score. Or you could go use proficiency bonus add, at which point they would get it a number of times, which is 0 plus their proficiency score. And then the reset type is, does it reset long rest, short rest? I don't recommend dawn because they have to remember then to reset the spell. You can set what level it's cast at, what the time is if you want to vary it from what the spell normally does, change the activation type, its range. You can say whether or not it's uses the so say for example you had a spell that they could cast light. That's a cantrip. Fireball. We'll go with Fireball. You can cast Fireball a number of times a day equal to your proficiency score. So you would go up here, we'd go 0. We want the ability score to be int because we need to have a save DC. And we have proficiency score per long rest. So we get it 2 times at a low level per long rest. And we say no to consume spell slot. So once those charges are done, that's it. And counts a spell known. You can say yes or no. Always prepared. You would say yes for something like a proficiency bonus. If you wanted just to say this spell is added to their spell list, you could count it as a known spell, but not a spell that is always prepared. So that they have to use one of their prepared slots to unlock it. If you want it to be added to their spell list and always prepared, you would set both of these to yes, and you would use a spell slot. If you want to do it where the ability will go, you can cast Fireball, and you can do it proficiency bonus and then use spell slots. My recommendation would actually be to create Fireball twice as 2 separate spells, once with the proficiency bonus and everything here, and then once with does use a spell slot, and just leave all this blank. Charges you don't really deal with. Is infinite, is only if you want them to constantly cast that spell. I would advise being very careful when you use this. And then any restrictions, put in the restriction box. They won't have mechanical effects, so the players have to be sure to read it. Actions, very much like with feats, you can pick an action. Actually, do we have one with actions here? No. Okay, so here we go, action. So we have Channel Divinity on this one. So go in, you can pick it to be a weapon, a spell, or a general action. Does it use an ability score? If it requires you to be at a certain level. If it's an attack, you can set its range, save DC, what kind of damage is it, how much die, how much of what die, does it add an effect, is there an effect on the save, is it an attack, if so put yes here, and it'll be displayed in the attack section. Does it have damage type? You get to pick which type of action it is. My recommendation is, if you have no idea, just put special. Reset type, if you pick a reset type, it will then gain charges. These, of course, will not, because so for example, if I go long rest, I have to save it. I'd then have to go back in, and what you can do then is go limited use. If you do not add a limited use, it will have one charge and will be used once per long rest. But here, much like with spells, you can go a number of uses plus a modifier, or plus or times your proficiency bonus. And you can set it that at a different level, it will do a different amount. So, for example, you could go at every 5 levels, you gain 1 use plus your wisdom modifier. So you would go 1 plus wisdom, and you would go level 1, save it, and then you would go in and add it again, but then you would go at level 5, you have 2, and you would just do that once, again and again and again, for each of the uses, for each of the levels you want. Creatures here is specifically if a creature, so for example, you want to add a creature to wild shape, and you would pick a specific creature type. This you're not really going to end up using, because as it currently stands, when a player picks wild shape, for example, on the character sheet, it doesn't necessarily always filter by the rules, meaning you can just pick whatever. But should that become more of a thing, that area is more where you would look to be adding specific creatures to specific effects. Additional spell list. So this is very much oath spells. You could put them in here instead of where we originally put them, which is additional specific spells. No, with additional specific spells, at the level you could cast them is when you unlock the spell. So you're not going to be able to get Fireball immediately with this. So there isn't really, I haven't really ever found a need to mess with this. Admittedly, I would encourage you to have a play with the additional spell list and see what you can do with it. Now, there have been 2 things I've been deliberately missing out: options and level scaling. As we can see here, we're going to go to one of this one. This one's Path of the Blood Rager, Barbarian, based off the Pathfinder one. And for this one, we did do Origins. Effectively, I did options for each of these class features. So we're going to go in here. So click Add Option. You've got to give it a name, snippet code, description. They are going to have to pick between the options. The default will be 1 per choice, unless on the class feature, when you selected it here, you picked for more options to be known. But we didn't, so there will only be 1 option, so you've got to pick between the 5. The thing we've done here is, as you can see here, a prerequisite. What we actually did was tie this to an earlier option in the class features that gave an option. So the level 3 barbarian ability for this subclass, I made it that there was an ancestry, and it picked which bloodline you were using. You could have dragon, celestial, demon, and so all of the later options are based off what original choice you made. So because for this one you would have had to have picked celestial, you will only be able to pick this option if at the start of the barbarian subclass you pick celestial ancestry. You can leave this blank if you don't want a prerequisite, but this mainly gives you option of doing something like this where you have a subclass within a subclass, so to speak, where it's something a bit weird and niche. And again, you get to pick modifiers, spells, actions, creatures. Very much the same as a normal subclass. But what the required class level is granted. The reason I ticked is granted in this case is because if they meet the prerequisite, they don't need to go into the editor to make the choice. The choice is made for them by their prerequisite. If you want them to be able to choose, however, then at that point I would say do not tick is granted. You want them to go into the editor and make the choice in the drop-down list. And then finally there is level scaling. So level scaling, you pick a level, you pick a die count, die type, fixed type. I'm trying to think of a good example where you would use this. Say, for example, you had a subclass feature like Barbarian Rage. We'll call it Barbarian Rage. And as we know with Barbarian Rage, as you level up your Barbarian, the Rage die increases. So what you would do is you would pick a level. You would then pick what die. So, for example, 1d4 to begin with. You would then save it. Obviously, go and add description for Rage at level 1, and you would add a level scale for each of the levels where this changes. Why you would want that is because in the snippet, there is a specific piece of code to call upon that level scaling. So then the snippet code, you could go, your Rage damage die is this, and it will reference the level scaling. So on the sheet, they can go, okay, that's my damage. Largely, that's about it for subclasses. I believe I've covered everything. As with all our videos, if you have any questions, please put them down below. We've already done one community comments video where I've gone through questions left in the comments, explaining different facets of the Homebrew editor, either because I didn't cover it well enough last time, or maybe because you have a specific thing you want to do, and I didn't really show you exactly how to do it. So on that note, also, if you have any recommendations, so for example, you go, I really want to know how to make this strange effect happen in the editor, how could I do that? Also feel free to put that in the comments, and again, I'll do more community comments videos in the future. So thank you all for coming, thank you all for joining, and we will see you all next time.